wormholes, particle physics, extra dimensions. Are the wonders of so-called reality really what they appear to be? Or do we exist in an elaborate hologram? Is our universe the result of random activity or the result of intelligent design? If a creator was involved, can we discover him through our perception of divine order? This is Into the Multiverse with Josh Peck.
It's a bird? It's a plane? No, it's a multiverse. Welcome to Into the Multiverse. I'm your host, Josh Peck, and with me, my beautiful, wonderful wife, Christina Peck.
Hello.
Christina, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. It's good to be here.
It's absolutely good to be here. I'm glad that we're doing this again. I'm excited about today's episode. It's one of my favorite topics because it has to do with Bible prophecy. Well, possibly. That's something that we'll explore to see how much this really has to do with it. Now, if this is your first time checking out the show, welcome. We're glad to have you. Christina, where can people find the show?
You can check us out on our homepage at skywatchtv.com, or you can go directly to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/skywatchtv_official.
There you go. You got it. You got through it.
It's a mouthful.
It is, but it's well worth it. So today we are talking about the Higgs field Doomsday, which is it's cool. It's it's destructive and very deadly to everything in existence, but
it's still awesome.
It's interesting, exactly.
It's like watching everything just like implode.
Yeah. Well, it really starts with the Higgs boson, and to people, you probably remember in 2012, even if you don't follow physics like we do, there was a big announcement. The Higgs boson was discovered, and it was a big deal, and a lot of people celebrated, and some other people didn't, and there were a lot of doomsday scenario things that were created from that.
A lot of people got scared and really started building those underground bunkers, and then even went down there. In 2012, they thought that maybe something might happen.
Yeah.
You and I were watching a show on the History Channel, like, well, we're going to go down there just in case there might be a zombie apocalypse or something.
Right.
So I'm like, well, I'll see you tomorrow, guys.
Yeah, I remember that. It was a crazy time, but it was the year that, what made it so controversial, I think in part was what name they attributed to the Higgs boson, which is the God particle.
Right. Yes.
And of course that got some people upset, because really what the whole thing turned out to be was just a big marketing campaign, basically. Yes. The guys that wrote it was based on a book that was written about the Higgs boson, and that's where the term God particle was coined. But in reality, the Higgs boson is just another particle. It doesn't. There's nothing especially godly or godlike about it. We can say every particle has something to do with God, because
God created all of them.
Right.
Even the ones that, CERN is like making new ones, with the Hadron Collider.
Well, yeah,
God still made those other particles.
Yeah, because in a sense, they don't create new particles.
No.
It's new to us because we don't know about them, but they're creating particles that, the fields already exist there.
Right, exactly.
So it's something that God created. And it's the same with the Higgs boson. But there's nothing especially esoteric or godlike about it. It's not any other particle, but because of that term, it got a lot of people upset and nervous, and now most physicists actually really hate that term, God particle, and it's not because they hate God. Maybe some of them do, but that's not why they hate the term. They hate the term because it doesn't represent the particle well at all.
No, they said if anything, it's more of a hassle and so much money going into it. So it's
the quote that we can't quote Christian television, but the author of the book had said, let's see if there's a way that I can. He said that the reason he called it the God particle was because he wasn't allowed to call it the God particle.
Fill in the blank, guys.
Fill in the blank. And he wanted to call it that because at that time, before its discovery, it was so elusive and so much money was being poured into trying to discover this thing that it was a big
So it was more
annoyance.
out of anger than this is the
And
God particle where everything comes from.
Exactly. So that's the story behind why they call it call it the God particle.
Yep.
That's the beautiful story. But actually, the history behind the Higgs boson is actually kind of interesting. There was a prediction in 1961 that was made by a physicist named Julian Schwinger, and he figured out that there would be a way for bosons to have mass. And back then, they thought that all bosons were massless because, again, if you remember from a previous episode, and if not, that's totally fine, bosons are force-carrying particles, which means they carry the forces. So, photons, that's the particle of electromagnetism, it's a particle of light. Gravitons carry gravity. So bosons carry force. They can take up the same space at the same time. So they're unlike the matter particles, fermions, which they are, matter. They carry matter.
Right.
So back then they thought all bosons would have to be massless. Now in 1964, Peter Higgs, building off of Julian Schwinger's work, Peter Higgs actually predicted a boson that had mass, but that idea was rejected in the physics community at first.
Like most things.
Yeah, a lot of times it took a couple of tries, but that's what would be later known as the Higgs boson. He was actually right. He predicted this back in 1964, which is amazing. And actually, when they discovered it, the discovery was announced July 4th, 2012, and Peter Higgs was actually there in the audience when they announced it, and he got emotional. He cried.
Yep.
But this is his entire life's work, and he, when he first predicted this thing, people told him that it was impossible and he was crazy and everything. So he actually got to. I
vaguely remember watching something on this with you.
Yeah.
We were watching some sort of physics and science program because we're nerds like that.
Those are our date nights.
Those are our date nights, and still to this day, still our date nights. I vaguely remember something being spoken about this.
Yeah.
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it was a phenomenal moment, and I mean, imagine being the whole culmination of your life's work finally gets realized. You don't even think you're going to live to see the day, because when this was first predicted, there would have been no way. I mean, the technology wasn't even close to being developed.
It's so ahead of its time, really, because 1964 to 2012, a lot has happened in those years.
He didn't think he would live to see the day, but he did. So that's pretty cool. So July 4th, 2012, that's when it was announced. But it was based on statistics. The way that they worded it, they said that a Higgs-like event has been detected. And those not in the physics community were kind of confused by that, and I think still are. There's a couple of good books out there that explain that. But basically, what that means is everything in particle physics is based on statistics.
Right.
Because you can't just look at a particle detection and say, oh, that is definitely, a Higgs boson. It doesn't work that way. They have to look at what the Higgs boson actually decays into, say photons or, whatever, electrons. But the thing is, other particles can decay into those same particles. So it's based on statistics, and there's different ways that they can do it. But, I mean, they're never going to be 100% sure. But fairly confidently that they discovered the Higgs boson. But the interesting thing about it, and why it has to be based on statistics and measuring the decay, is that once a Higgs boson appears, it decays in the span of what's called a zeptosecond. 1 zeptosecond is 1 sextillionth of a second. It's 10 to the minus 21 seconds. So imagine it's a 0.001 21 zeros and a 1. It's that short amount of time.
Can't even imagine. I thought like way back in science class when we were talking about nanoseconds, and they were like, well, that's weird.
Yep.
And microseconds and zeptosecond.
And we're not even close to
No.
being at a level of technology where we can detect something in that short amount of time. So they have to look at what it decays into, but they were able to get enough of these because actually it was estimated that before 2012, probably hundreds of thousands of Higgs bosons were detected, but they didn't. They had no way of knowing because they decay into the same things that other things decay into. But
Right.
once you get enough of them with enough of the anomalies that are specific to just Higgs bosons, then you start building a case that this is
We've seen this happen before. This is what it is.
yeah.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
now they can say fairly confidently, and it's still not 100% sure, but even it's sure. I mean, it would have to be something so ridiculous that
It's
if it
happened
wasn't
enough
that,
times.
yeah. So there would be something else,
They're the
really
experts
crazy
in this
going
field.
on. So they have it, but. But the interesting thing about the Higgs boson is not the Higgs boson itself. It's an interesting particle, but this idea came out that said, the Higgs boson gives things their mass, Not exactly accurate. Before we go down that rabbit trail, I want to take a break for a quick commercial. You're going to want this information. It's very interesting. When we come back, we're going to talk more about what the true importance of the Higgs boson actually is right after this.
In 2012, they shocked the international community when they predicted the resignation of Pope Benedict 1 year in advance.
Breaking news, Pope Benedict XVI announces his resignation.
Yeah, it is the first time in centuries a pope has stepped down.
And I knew Pope Benedict was going to step down April 2012.
Leaving the world wondering just who their insider at the Vatican really was. In 2013, they exposed the mysteries of Mount Graham, the Lucifer device,
This first station is an instrument called Lucifer.
and the Vatican's secret plan for the arrival of an alien savior. Then in 2015, they took the world underground to uncover the truth behind the Native American legends of giants, the portals they once came through, and the most overlooked aspect of end times prophecy regarding their return. Now, in their final entry to the explosive 4-year investigation, internationally acclaimed best-selling authors Thomas Horn and Chris Putnam unveil their greatest discovery and make their most astonishing prediction yet, involving the imminent prophesied arrival of a mysterious, final Roman emperor.
At that time, the prince of injustice, who will be called the Antichrist, will rise. He will be the son of perdition and the culmination of pride. He will deceive many, but when the Roman Empire will fall, then the Antichrist will show himself, and he will sit in the house of God in Jerusalem. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that brought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone.
Thomas Horn, Chris Putnam. This will be the final entry and the greatest prediction yet, coming May 2016. The final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's last crusade.
And we're back. All right, so before we left, we had just got done saying that the Higgs boson it was an important discovery, but that's not the real discovery.
Right.
The boson, the Higgs boson, is evidence that there's a Higgs field. The Higgs field is the really interesting discovery. Every elementary particle, as we discussed in a previous episode, every elementary particle has an associated field to it. So photons have the electromagnetic field. There's an up quark field. Every fundamental particle has a field. So if they detect a Higgs boson, and it's a fundamental particle, which means it's not made of other particles, then they know that a Higgs field exists. It's the Higgs field that determines mass, interaction with the Higgs field. And just to recap from the last episode, a field is like every point in space has a value of a certain thing. Like if you think of the gravitational field, it permeates every point in space, but the values of each point in space are going to be larger the closer you are, say, to the Earth, because the gravity is stronger, as opposed to out in the middle of space where it's going to be almost basically non-existent, or at a zero resting rate is what they call it. So that means that there's this Higgs field thing that permeates all of space.
Yep.
Interaction with the Higgs field is what determines mass. Now, there are particles like photons. They don't interact with the Higgs field at all, so they don't have mass.
Right.
But we interact with the Higgs field.
Yes.
We have mass.
We have mass.
That's mass, and it's so interesting because mass is just an interaction with a field. That's all it is.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about, because we were discussing before the show. Light is its own deal. It's got its own photons, massless. It's easy for it to go at high speeds because it doesn't have mass.
Yeah, and that's why, like you said, particles of light, photons have to be massless. They travel at the speed of light because they are light. But the problem is, if you have mass and you're traveling the speed of light, you're at infinite mass.
And that's not possible.
It's not possible. So,
and
that's why that happens, because the faster you're moving, you're picking up more mass because you're interacting with the Higgs field more.
Exactly.
So that's what causes that. And,
yes.
If you work it out mathematically, once you reach the speed of light,
then you're just infinitely massive,
and so it just all breaks apart.
It doesn't work.
So the interesting thing about the Higgs field is the energy level that it's actually resting at. Most fields are at a zero resting rate, resting level, which means when they're resting, they're not doing anything. They're at zero,
and they're happy with it.
Yeah, exactly. But the Higgs field is different. The Higgs field is at a positive. Physicists will use terms like non-zero energy value or non-zero energy rate or something like that. Basically, what it means is when the Higgs field is at rest, when it's just naturally how it is, it's at a positive energy value, which is strange, because the other fields aren't like that. The other fields, once it's zero, it's zero. But that's actually incredibly important, because the Higgs field is at this sort of the knife's edge of energy. And it took me a while to really get my head around this when I first started
it's a mind
researching
bender.
this. Yeah, it is. And it was actually a physicist named Joseph Licken, who has a couple presentations on YouTube. I highly suggest them if you're interested in this.
Brilliant.
They're really interesting stuff. And he was actually the first one that I heard about this Higgs field doomsday thing that we'll be getting into in a minute. But he and physicist Sean Carroll, helped me understand how this Higgs field energy thing works. A good analogy that sort of helps us picture why this is the way it is. If you think of a pendulum hanging from a ceiling, that is a good metaphor for every other field. When it's just hanging there, not moving, it's at zero. It's not moving at all. You actually have to push the pendulum. That adds energy to it. It's the same as these other quantum fields. When you add energy to the quantum field, you get a particle, something happens. Every other field is like that, but the Higgs, for some reason, is different.
Right.
The Higgs is more comparable to a pendulum that's fastened to the floor, and it's off to one side.
Yeah.
So it's at a positive energy level. It would actually take you adding energy and pushing it up
to get it to zero.
To get it to zero, exactly. Yeah. But even then, even if you were able to do that, it would most likely fall to one side or another.
Doesn't like it resting at zero.
No, but the interesting thing is that the Higgs field would actually prefer to be at an even higher energy level than it is now.
But something is holding it back.
Something's holding it back, and it's a good thing that it is. It's kind of like if you have a ball at the base of a really short hill, like just barely a bump. And then at the other end of that hill is a cliff, just careening down for thousands of feet. So as long as nothing touches the ball, or as long as nothing adds energy to that ball, it's fine. Everybody's happy, no danger. But the second a gust of wind comes and pushes the ball up that little hill, it's going to go careening down the cliff.
Right, yeah.
And
the Higgs boson wants...
Higgs field.
Oh, Higgs field. I'm sorry, not boson. Higgs field. I'm sorry. Wants that to happen.
Yeah. That's actually what it would prefer to do. That's what it's pulling towards, but something is
holding it back. Thankfully,
yeah, because and so Joe Licken talked about this in his presentation, and he said that all it would take is some funny little quantum fluctuation out there in space somewhere, which quantum fluctuations happen all the time. That's what a particle is a quantum fluctuation. So those happen all the time, but it would take just the right, amount somewhere in the universe. And what would happen is it would create this bubble in the Higgs field that would expand at the speed of light, eventually engulfing the entire universe and destroying everything. And actually, he had a slide on there that, and it was in the seminar, and you can find this on YouTube. Again, I highly suggest it. It's really interesting.
Very.
But he had a slide that stated, if this standard model calculation is correct, eventually fireballs of doom will form spontaneously and expand to destroy the universe. Because what would happen is the Higgs field would reset to this higher energy level, meaning everything would become more massive.
Yes.
And I mean, it would be to the point where particles are their own black holes. Then you have black holes combining into other, miniature black holes. And basically it would turn everything into a giant black hole. It would become the true vacuum. See, right now there's this phrase in physics that's kind of a misnomer. It says empty space isn't empty. I don't think they should word it that way because it's confusing.
It is.
It nullifies itself. What they should say is something like empty space isn't real, or empty space doesn't exist, or empty space isn't what we think. Something like that. Basically, what we think of as empty space, what we think of as that, outer space out in the far reaches where nothing's around, it's not truly empty because there's fields and there's virtual particles popping in and out of existence because of
lots of weird stuff.
Yeah, so there's stuff still happening. If this Higgs field doomsday scenario happens and the Higgs field energizes and this bubble is created, inside that bubble would be the true vacuum where it truly is empty space, because you can't have the only particles that would survive something like that would be the massless ones like photons that don't interact with the Higgs field at all. You wouldn't be able to have particles combining with others to create atoms, and life would be impossible. Now, why do we bring this up? We talk about the Bible in this show, and I mentioned at the top of the show that we're going to be talking about prophecy. What does this have to do with that at all? Well, actually, I think, and this is a possibility, I can't say this for sure, but I think that Joe Licken might have actually chanced upon something prophetic. When we read 2 Peter 3:10, it states, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with a fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. And we also have another verse that gives us a little more information. 2 Peter 3:12 states, looking for and hasting unto the coming of the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Now, the interesting thing here, you and I looked at all this Greek stuff from blueletterbible.com. Excellent website for this type of research. You can actually look into the Greek and everything. So the word heavens in both of those verses is translated from the Greek word ouranos, which can be understood as, and this is a quote from the actual concordance, the universe or the world. Now, the word elements, this is really interesting, comes from the Greek word stoichion, and can mean any first thing from which the others belonging to some series or composite whole take their rise, an element, first principle. For example, the heavenly bodies, either as parts of the heavens or as others think, because in them the elements of man, life, and destiny were supposed to reside, and the elements from which all things have come, the material causes of the universe. So what we might actually have in these two verses is a representation of the universal macro scale, which would be the word heavens, and the quantum micro scale, which would be the word elements. The heavens seem to be referring to the universe as a whole, while the elements might actually be referring to elementary particles, given the context of the verse and the Greek definition of stoichion. So could this mean that the Higgs field energizing will be the mechanism that God may use to cause the heavens to pass away and the earth to burn up? You know, it's possible. I mean, if you look at that definition again from the Greek, it says, any first thing from which the others belonging to some series or composite whole take their rise. That's what a particle is.
Yes.
That a particle is a series of other particles until you get down to the fundamental particle or the elements. Like an atom, you have the atomic nucleus made of quarks and gluons and things like that, and then you have an electron spinning around it. Well, those first things, you know, those elements are what make the atom. So maybe that's what was being discussed.
So cool to think about.
It is, but now it's possible that Licken's Higgs field doomsday was actually first predicted 2,000 years ago, and if so, that's something. Is it something we need to fear? No, because we're also told 2 Peter 3:13. It says, "Nevertheless, we, according to His promise, look for new heavens and a new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness."
Yeah.
Even if this is the mechanism that God uses, it's nothing we have to fear. Physical existence wouldn't be able to exist the way we think of it, but new heaven, new earth, who knows? You know, we know that we'll be here through that in new bodies that can probably, I would imagine, exist in such an environment if that's what He's going to do. There is so much more that we could talk about with this, but unfortunately we are all out of time. Next week, we're going to be talking about dreams and the quantum consciousness, and we have our very first Into the Multiverse interview with somebody. So make sure,
special guest.
Yeah, make sure to stay tuned and check that out. If you have suggestions or questions, ideas for shows, anything like that, you can email me at jpeck@skywatchtv.com, and we'll be happy to take a look at your question and possibly talk about it on the air. Once again, Christina, where can people find the show online?
Sure, skywatchtv.com. You can follow the link to our YouTube channel or go straight to the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/skywatchtv_official.
Fantastic. All right, well, until next time, I am Josh Peck, and this is Christina Peck. This is Into the Multiverse. As always, take care, and God bless.